Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today we're going to be checking out the Airlift Load Controller 2 air compressor system. And with this, it's going to be a great addition to those of you that are going to be installing airbags or air springs on your vehicle, or for those of you that might already have them and are just looking for an easier way to adjust your pressure and kind of keep an eye on things. While all the different types of airbags or air springs are going to have a manual inflation valve, that way you can fill them up with your hose, that works just fine to make your pressure changes and things like that, but it kind of limits you a little bit. You're kind of just taking an educated guess on what you think is going to be right when it comes to that pressure. So a lot of times what can happen, you take a gas, you get hooked up, you get going down the road and realize you need to make a change. Well, if you have to add air, then it's pretty inconvenient because you'll have to find a gas station or something you can swing into, or if you have a garage style air compressor with you or something like that, you could always use. But like I said, that's inconvenient. So having an onboard air compressor lets you adjust that pressure on the fly and get everything dialed in. And we have our gauge and everything set up on the inside of our truck. So let's check that out and show you how it works. The gauge assembly is how you're going to be able to monitor the amount of pressure in your bags as well as make any changes here. So to add air, just push up on this button. That'll kick the compressor on and fill the bags up. To let air out, you just hit the dump valve and that will release some of the pressure. Now with that said, this is going to be good for up to 100 psi. The kit's also going to really help with maintenance. So what I mean by that is the vast majority of the air bags or air springs out there are always going to require minimum pressure, usually of 5. If it falls below that, a lot of times you can damage the airbag or the air spring. And so this is going to have a built-in low pressure switch. So if it sees that, say if you don't use this for a while, not really thinking about it, if this sees that the pressure in the bags fall below that, it'll automatically turn on, keeping them at that minimum pressure. That way you don't have to worry about damaging your air spring. This is going to be a single path compressor system. So what that means is you have one air line coming from your compressor to both of your air springs. So whenever you adjust it, let's say you put 20 pounds air in it, you're going to have 20 pounds in both air springs. You're not going to be able to adjust the springs independently, which is how the vast majority of people use their compressor systems anyway. People aren't really too worried about that. But if you are someone who wants to be able to adjust each spring individually, there's a lot of different kits out there that will allow you to do that. And with this being an analog type compressor, meaning we have this gauge assembly here, something that you need to think about if this is one you're interested in is fitment. Are you going to be able to have a spot to mount this up in your particular vehicle? I say that because this is something that I've personally ran into from past experience. Honestly, this will bolt up to just about any vehicle, but is it going to be in an ideal spot so you can see and quickly make those adjustments? Or is it going to be in a place that, just doesn't look that great, if you will? And with a lot of these late model vehicles, you just don't have the space like you used to. A lot of times you got these big screens, a lot of buttons and different adjustments and things like that. So, are you going to want this gauge mounted to your dash or something along those lines? This is definitely more of a economical kit, so I could see why it interests a lot of people. And so a lot of times what would happen is we get a brand new pickup truck in here. They're not cheap nowadays, and people want to use this kit. And like I said, it'll work. You can mount it up wherever you want, I guess. But ultimately, are you going to want to have your new vehicle and have to look at this in a spot that isn't so easy on the eyes? And so what a lot of people end up doing in that case, which is what I would recommend, is changing over to a wireless type air compressor. That way, the body of the compressor and everything will be underneath the truck where you can't see it, but having the wireless aspect of it, instead of having a gauge an analog gauge to make your adjustments and everything with, you'll have a remote that you can do that. So you're not bolting anything up to your vehicle or nothing along those lines. And they even make them now to where they're Bluetooth compatible, so you can use your mobile device to make all those changes. So just wanted to throw that out there. But with that in mind, you know, if this isn't going to bother you or it's what you're used to, I definitely understand that. We'll grab a couple measurements to help you figure out if this can fit in a spot on your vehicle that you'd like to put it. As far as our length here, or the mounting bracket, that's going to be right at 5 inches. As far as the height of it goes, it's going to be roughly 2 3/4 of an inch. And you know, these lines and stuff are going to have to stay connected. An air line will run into your vehicle or wherever you have this mounted and get connected here. So all this stuff will have to stay. And we'll just go from that end fitting to the face of our gauge. That'll be about 4.5 inches. So pretty compact for what it is, but it's something to think about, you know, for sure. If you're trying to get this in a tight spot, hopefully those measurements can help you figure out if it will fit there or not. As far as the main body of the compressor, it's pretty compact, so you can put it pretty much anywhere you want for the most part. Where I usually end up putting compressors and the manifolds and everything is right here in this area, usually on our frame. If you're trying to figure out where you're going to be able to mount this, the overall length of it will be 8 3/4 of an inch long, 3.5 inches tall. The width will be about 6 inches. So like I said, pretty compact. You can put these in a lot of different places. Just try to keep them dry if you can, out of the weather and stuff like that. But since it is compact, you know, we're not going to have a super heavy duty compressor inside. So this will, you know, it'll take a little bit longer to inflate your bags, especially at higher pressures, or if you're trying to do it with a load on your vehicle. So keep that in mind. If you're looking for one that's going to be a little more responsive, faster when you're going to air up your springs, you know, you might want to look into something a little more heavy duty. So with this, definitely a good entry level type compressor that's going to help you keep your bags maintained, adjust those pressures and everything else. So I'd recommend something like this for those of you that aren't using this on a daily basis. Maybe just on the weekend, every now and again, it'd be a great choice. You know, if you're wanting something for, say, your work truck, you're using it just about every day of the week, constantly making adjustments, definitely that's where a more heavy-duty compressor would come into play. It'll just be faster and be up to the higher demands that you're asking of it. A lot of people do wonder if, you know, this particular compressor system is going to be compatible with their air springs, meaning they might have a different brand or something like that. And the compressor doesn't care what brand of air springs you got on your vehicle. You know, today we have on our vehicle the Airlift Load Lifter 5000 springs, works just fine. If you happen to have a Firestone airbag, doesn't matter, it's going to pump it up full of air. Something to consider though is what your airbags are going to be rated for. So a lot of them out there are going to be good for 100 PSI, like these two here, and compressor is a good matchup for those, right? Because you're not going to be able to exceed its maximum pressure. But there's some more heavy duty type airbags that are good for 150 PSI. So if you have those, this compressor is going to be underpowered. It's not going to be able to utilize the maximum pressure that some of them bags are rated for. So just think about that. And then you have some different types of air springs that are good for usually about 50 PSI. A lot of those you'll see will be on some of the SUVs, smaller vehicles where they go in the actual coil spring. See a lot, minivans and things like that use those. And so like I said, a lot of them are only good for 50 PSI. So if that's your setup, be conscious of that, because you don't want to have the compressor overfill them and potentially damage them. Should be noted too, the compressor kit is going to come with a bunch of ins and outs and also some fittings which will allow you to still keep and utilize one of your manual inflation valve. So if you just want to have this back here as a backup, you're still able to do that and be able to inflate your air springs the old-fashioned way. Other than that, at the end of the day, if you're someone who's looking for a very simple and economical way to be able to maintain and adjust your air springs, this is definitely a kit that is worth considering. But with that said, I think that'll about do it for our look at of the Airlift Load Controller 2 air compressor system.